Hey, what's up,
Hey,
Steve?
how's it going, Paul? Good to see
Good.
you.
Yeah,
Hey,
likewise.
so I'm really happy to be here today and we're going to be talking about some stuff that I'm super interested in, but I haven't had a chance to go real deep into.
hmm
Getting intelligent applications running in AKS and all of the attendant goodness there. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what we're going to dig into today, Paul?
Yeah, so today's going to be an interesting exercise. We have a hands-on workshop content for you all to go through. So if you're at your computer or if you want to just bookmark this later, scan that QR code, or if you can make that URL out on the screen here, and if you want to type it in, go ahead. My bad. I should have made it a little bit shorter. So, but yeah, we have a jam-packed hands-on workshop for everybody to go and check out. We're going to be deploying an AI application on an AKS cluster, but not just any AKS cluster. It's going to be an AKS Automatic cluster. So if you haven't heard, that's a new, I guess, flavor of AKS. And so we're going to be leveraging that in this workshop. And yeah, it's just good to be here. I haven't done one of these Learn Lives in a few months. So happy to uh, be on the stream with y'all. Let's see. Let's move this slide forward a little bit. There we go. Kind of a glimpse of the application that we're going to be deploying. And again, scan that QR code or type that URL, and you can get to the hands-on workshop content. We
And that
do
URL is in the chat.
that URL is in the chat. Awesome. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah,
All right.
we have our wonderful producer Anna behind the scenes. So shout out to Anna. She'll be dropping in some links as we go. And yeah, we want to make this live and interactive. So pop in a chat, pop in a comment, say hi, ask questions, do whatever, and we'll do our very best to get those answered for you.
Yep. Yeah, we're in there and watching. So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you got
yeah.
questions as we go along, let's hear them.
Yeah. Um, So
I know
what's
I
our learning objectives for today? Well, we're going to be onboarding an AI app to AKS, and we're going to take an iterative approach to this because here's the scenario. And I'm sure this might resonate with a lot of people that's out there, especially for like DevOps engineers or platform engineers. And the scenario is this: you get an application that
so
gets
it,
dumped on your lap.
did you air quote those because they're not real jobs or because
They are real jobs. It's just
they're
there's so many
definitely real
terms,
jobs,
right?
right? They're
Yeah,
definitely real jobs, and like
yeah. Definitely
don't be
real
dismissing my
jobs.
DevOps engineers and my platform engineers. Come on now.
My bad, Steve. You're like the OG DevOps dude. Like you,
No,
yeah, with that team
yeah,
back in the days, that was awesome. But yeah, it's just the terms are so interchangeable now. Like, but to me,
yeah.
it's just hey, are you a person, an engineer that can actually do the things and automate the things and get things deployed into the production systems? I call it whatever engineering. Put
Yeah.
whatever label you want on it. I think it's all engineering. So
You know I like messing with you, but yeah, it's fun.
yeah,
It's fun.
yeah, yeah.
All right. All
No.
right.
It's all
So,
good. But
so
yeah,
I'm derailing you here already. We're into the learning objectives. I'm already running you off track. So I'll let you get back to it.
yeah, yeah. So going back to the scenario that we have is you get an application that's developed by some awesome engineering team, and you get it just dumped on your lap, and you say, and somebody tells you, hey, I need you to put this into production, put it on Kubernetes, go, right? Without
Yeah.
any like real awareness of like, okay, what does this app do? What do I need? So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take
And
this app.
I'm sure I'm sure your first thought was, oh yeah, that was an awesome engineering team, right? But no,
They're
no,
all
no.
awesome.
They're all awesome. No,
Yeah, yeah.
they,
No,
they
but
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
as we said, the engineering team probably had zero context as to where this thing was going to end up getting deployed anyway. So like, they're working in a equally blinded
Yeah.
context. So,
Yeah.
so yeah.
No good engineers really worry about where it gets deployed to. Just build the logic, put together the awesome UIs, and go. But no, like in all seriousness, this app was actually built by our partner teams in cloud advocacy, Python and the AI team. So
So it
really
really is
cool
awesome
app.
engineering. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really cool app, and I'm excited to just kind of dig into it and play with it. So we'll start off with like local development. Like, how do I get it to run on my machine, right? Because that's the common term that you hear all the time, right? Does it work? Yeah, it works on my machine.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see about that. So we'll go from local development, and then graduate into like a containerized development, and then eventually put this thing on AKS Automatic, so that it not only works on your machine, but it works on any machine across the globe at Azure scale, right? So that's what we're gonna do. Okay.
All
And
right.
so we'll do that by doing the following. We're gonna just dive right in. I don't have very much slides beyond this, so sorry about
Well, that's
that.
good.
If you're interested
No,
in,
no, no,
in
that's good.
slides.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's get into the code and the commands. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to provision some Azure resources. We're going to use Azure Developer CLI for that, and then like I said, we're just going to make sure that it runs locally, and then kind of like iterate from there. So it's going to be a fun one. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let's see. Let's just go right into the lab instructions. So if you've navigated to the hands-on workshop content, you should see this lab containerizing and deploying AI workloads on AKS. A bunch of learning objectives here, and a huge laundry list of prerequisites. So I'm sorry about that, but you do need a lot of these tools to get started here. You're going to need Azure subscription number one, and then this app is written in Python for the backend API, and then Node.js for the front end UI. So you'll need both of those tools as well. You also need Docker Desktop, because we are going to containerize this and run this locally. Terraform, my infrastructure as code tool choice. There are others, but just kind of like where I live most of the time. And then Azure CLI, because we need to work with the AKS resources and whatever, and the Azure Developer CLI. We're actually going to use the Azure Developer CLI as a wrapper for Terraform to kind of go kick off that process. Okay.
Before we get too far here,
Mhm.
I just want to note about the subscription, because this comes up on occasion.
Mhm.
Like if you have like just the subscription with like the free resources, or you're using an environment and learn live, um,
Mhm.
because we're deploying AKS, like you can't do it in the Learn sandbox.
Mhm.
So you need to have your own subscription, and it's probably going to exceed the free cores you have available. So
Probably so. Yeah.
so running this lab might cost a couple of dollars. So just to be aware that
Mhm.
it's not a free lab. Just to, set some
Unfortunately,
expectations. I don't want anyone to go run this and think and then be surprised.
yeah. But we'll try to keep the costs as minimal as possible.
Yep.
Um, One cool thing about infrastructure as code and like the Azure Developer CLI and just Azure CLI in general is that you can throw it all away in a single command too. So that's
Yeah.
probably what I recommend.
Right.
Once you're
And
done.
that's
Mhm.
that would be the next thing. Like, that you can spin it up, do some learning, and then tear it down, and so you're only build for the time that you actually are doing something.
Right, right. Yeah. Cool. That's a great call out there. So I have a list of all these tools that you're going to need. But the good thing to know here is that all these tools are they're all packaged into the dev container configuration, which you can go ahead and spin up using GitHub Codespaces, or if you have the dev container extension in your Visual Studio Code, you can do that as well. And I'll show you. I'll demo this mostly locally because I just been working with it locally. It's just easier for me. But I'll show you how to spin it up in Codespaces as well. Okay. One other thing to really note about AKS Automatic for right now, AKS Automatic, and I'll talk a little bit more about what AKS Automatic is and what it does and all that good stuff. But just a heads up, it is in preview. And as of this recording today, this can change later, but as of right now, you're going to need enough virtual CPU quotas like what Stephen mentioned. So you're going to need at least 32 vCPU of standard DS V2. 24 is the minimum, 32, I tend to just ask for 32 all the time. So, and if you don't know how to request a quota increase, you can actually click this link here and get to that. Okay. So let's take a look at the application that we are building. Okay. It's a nice, pretty diagram, right? So what this is, and I'll just give a high level overview of what type of AI application this is. It's basically an app that can help you write creative content by leveraging a bunch of AI services that's available on Azure. Okay. If you look at, it says multi-agent creative writing copilot. What this means is that the team that wrote this actually wrote multiple AI components into here, right? And so you can see in the processing services here, there's a researcher agent. What this agent will do is actually go out to various sources and go collect information. It'll do like Bing searches, Azure OpenAI, serve models to actually write the content, and then use Azure AI Search to go search against an index of product data, right? So, and the whole purpose here is to write a blog content on specific products. Okay.
Is this how you do all your blogs?
No, not yet, but I should. I think I should. I need to write something. I need to write something similar to this. But yeah, so there's a researcher agent that'll go gather information. And then there's another AI agent that'll actually write the content. And here's the cool part. There's an editor agent, which will go check the work, right? So we're relying on multiple models here. And they're basically just kind of like, one is writing it, the other model's checking it and is saying, I don't like that. Can you reword it? And so it's like two models talking to each other, which is pretty wild. And all this is deployed onto an AKS cluster. And to get to this repo, go ahead and click the link here, Contoso Creative Writer. So I'll just click that link and let me zoom in a little bit. So I have actually forked this repo from the Azure Samples repo. So that's where the original content is. And just a heads up, a disclaimer, I put this content together about 3 or 4 weeks ago before I left for vacation. It has changed drastically since then. So the UI is different. It's been improved. So if you want to go take a look at what the latest and greatest is, do head over to the original repo, go star it, fork it, do whatever you need to do there. But here, this is just a snapshot of, point in time, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. And this is just what we're working with here. Okay. So what you should do is you should probably fork my fork. Fork my fork, because that's what we're working with in this workshop. Okay. Once you fork it, you could either clone it to your local machine, or you can open it in Codespaces. Okay. I already have a Codespace kind of fired up, ready to go here. But if you don't, you may see a button right here. So you got to click on the code button, click on the Codespace tab. There's a button right here that says open Codespace on main, I believe. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and fire this thing up. And Codespaces can launch in a number of different ways. You can launch it in your browser, or you can launch it within your own VS Code. And so you do need a GitHub account. Sorry about that. I forgot to call that out, right? Because Codespaces doesn't work without a GitHub account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you aren't going to use Codespaces, you can still get the code without a GitHub account. Because you can download the code and do the stuff all locally. But it's easiest with the GitHub account.
Mm-hmm. You probably need to just clone my repo, and I think as long as you have just Git, you can just clone from any public source, right? So
yeah. So you can definitely get the code no matter what, but if you want to do the Codespaces thing, you need a GitHub account.
Yeah. So there it is. It's fired up in my Codespace, and I can kind of like work with it there. Let's go back to the instructions.
If you just do like a which and point to one, and all the tools all the dependencies that Paul had listed out there, they're all available in the dev container. So that's good. I just wanted to make sure we called that out. So like you don't have to install that stuff locally. Use the dev container, whether it's in Codespaces or locally, and you can get up and running much more quickly.
Yeah, which I like, because that was a long list of tooling there, which I just normally have laying around on my local machine, but I know a lot of people kind of don't, especially if you don't work with this kind of stuff every day. So
well, and if you're switching between projects, like you might have different versions of tools required.
That's
you might, especially runtimes, right? Or languages, runtimes, SDKs, right? The dev container helps you keep all of that stuff kind of squared away.
Yeah, that's right. So what we'll do is we'll actually use the Azure Developer CLI to kind of like bootstrap and provision all of these resources that you see here, because we're going to need that, especially if we're going to be testing locally. A lot of times when developers code for the cloud, they just expect some of these resources just to be out there, and somebody says, the endpoint's over here or the keys over here, just go, plop that into your environment variables and away you go. So we may not have that yet. So we're going to go ahead and just provision all the resources that you see in the diagram here. Additionally, because we are going to be deploying to AKS Automatic, we want to take advantage of a lot of the features that Automatic will kind of integrate really nicely with. And so I'll be using the Azure Developer CLI and Terraform to provision a Azure Container Registry, Log Analytics Workspace, Prometheus, Grafana, Container Insights.
Paul,
and that,
since this deployment takes a little while, why don't we just jump in and start deploying it, and then maybe we can come back and look at a couple of these things.
That's a great idea, Steve. Thank you.
Because then we can take best advantage of people's time, right?
You got it. All right, let's do that. Let's first. I want to just hide that.
And because this stuff is infrastructure as code, even if you have like Paul was saying, you may or may not have some of those resources available and configured the way you need. But because it's infrastructure as code, we can run this provision multiple times and get the same result out. And so there isn't, other than a couple of minutes of time, if the resources already exist, there's no real loss doing that.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I've already logged into my Azure CLI, but if you haven't, go ahead and run AZ login and then run AZD auth login. Those are the two login commands that you'll need. And then I'll create a new ACD environment. AZD can kind of differentiate between deployments. And so I did that, and I gave a title of Learn Live. And then I can set my subscription ID for AZD, and then I can set a location. I have France Central in here, but I'm not going to use France Central. I am going to use East US 2. Okay.
Is 2 or
2 is what I'll use. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I will just run the AZD provision. Here's a heads up. AZD can do multiple things for you. It can provision your code. It can provision your infrastructure.
and then tell us.
Enter.
Yeah. Okay.
It can provision your infrastructure. And it can also deploy your code. So there's 2 commands for that. There's AZD provision to provision your infrastructure, AZD deploy to deploy your code to the infrastructure, and then there's AZD up, which can do both. I don't want it to do both. The whole point of this exercise is to kind of like step through this manually. So all I'm doing is taking advantage of the AZD provision part. Okay.
Awesome.
So wait on that, and it'll eventually go. But let's go ahead and skip over and see what we got over here, because I know we're a little bit short on time here, and I have an environment pre-baked. So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
let's
So you went and did something ahead of time on me. So okay, I thought
yeah.
I thought we were gonna wait around. I thought we were gonna have to fill some time here and so that's why I was kind of rushing you to get this thing going. You changed it out on me. Too prepared.
Yeah. We got no time for that.
Doing the cooking show thing here. All right.
Exactly. I mean, but to provision that kind of that stuff, it really doesn't take
About 10
too long. I
minutes.
think about 15-ish minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see I'm in another VS Code editor, and this is white background, which helps me differentiate, between the 2 environments. So let's go back to the instructions. And so what you want to do is, after your AZD provision has completed, you can actually go grab the values, because Terraform has output values and output variables. And so you can actually grab all that and dump it out to a local env file. And so if I do that, and
Now,
I do
is it going to pick up the right environment from AZD because you created a new one? Did that change the context?
Well, this is from my
from your
pre-provisioned
previous
environment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it has all of the configuration things that I need for my app. And no worries, Steve. I know I'm showing a bunch of stuff in here that I probably shouldn't be showing, but I am going to throw this environment away as soon as we're done with this call.
All
So
right.
it's not going to really mean anything here.
We'll let you slide.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll
you
go ahead.
You may not have heard, but we kind of care about security things these days.
We definitely care about security.
We have for a long time, but we really care about them these days.
Yeah. I just wanted to show it to everybody on the call here, just to show what's all in there. It's a ton of information there. Okay, so let's do this. Let's start.
And it's important to know that there could be some sensitive stuff in there, so make sure to protect your environments, right?
Absolutely. And I actually call it out in the lab instructions here, where there's a lot of stuff that's put into that env file that we're using. Not the best practice. There are better ways to take care of your secrets, especially in Kubernetes, using like things like Key Vault, workload identity, and all that stuff. Okay.
Yeah. I think the core use case for the AZD tooling is really, developer learning and experience, right? And so we might, we might treat some of those values as differently than we do stuff that's going out to a production or pre-production environment.
Right. Okay, let me see something here. I think I forgot to do something. There we go. Okay, so while we're chatting through that, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to run, because there's 2 applications. Remember, there's a backend API written in Python and then a front end UI written in Node. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fire these applications up locally. Okay, so I'll run this command again. Oops. Bum, bum. Oh, I'm not in the right directory. There we go. No. Retrying.
Do you have something else listening there already?
I didn't think I did.
Connection in use, it's saying.
Yeah. It's saying it's in use. So what's the lsof command? Let's just see if there's anything. No, there isn't. Docker compose.
Yeah,
I did a down.
We did the down.
RM. Down.
You running this in a different shell?
Let's see. CD clear. Oh, no module found.
You didn't activate your VM.
Right. Oh,
yeah,
man.
It's saying the port's in use.
Yeah. What's the command here? There's a command here where I can go kill the process for a port.
You should be able to see what's listening with like netstat, LSOF will work. What's the switches? Dash lowercase n, capital P.
Lowercase n.
Yeah.
All right.
Capital
lowercase
P.
n.
Capital P right after that. So it should be ports by number.
It was a dash n. Oh. And
maybe grep through for 5,000.
Yeah. 5,000.
Just grep through the output. Something easier than figuring out the command.
Yeah.
Okay. VS, one of your VS Code instances is kept the port forwarding going.
Oh, maybe I need to kill that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, you are right. So let me go.
It's gotten so good at remembering these things. It could be your Codespaces one.
I'm gonna kill this. Oh, by the way, everything finished provisioning over here. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kill that, and I am hopefully. I think that's okay now. Activate. Boom. Hey. Okay.
There we go.
Ooh. Thank you, Steve.
Look at that.
Lifesaver. Okay. All right. So we got that back end going. Let's get the front end going as well. Hopefully I don't run into any issues over there.
This is how you can tell you're doing it live and not just talking to a recording, right?
Yeah. If there's no hiccup, then is it really live? All right. So these two things are working locally, and let me just increase that resolution. And I want to leave this here. Okay. So here's the app. Okay. And we're gonna have to start moving a little bit quicker. So what I'll do is it says get started. You supply the context and the instructions. I'll hit the try an example button, and then I'll say get to work. Okay. Then you'll see the creative team kind of like working, and the creative team are the agents that we talked about. If you head over to the API logs of the Python project, you'll see that it's starting to do the researcher task. And so it's using the Bing search API to go search for things that might be related to products. And then it's going to grab the actual product information from the AI search index. And then here it's doing the writer task, right? So we do have one AI agent that will actually do the writing, and then the other AI agent will go and check the work and then supply some feedback for that. So we'll just have to give this a little bit of a be patient here. See, this says editor reject feedback. So basically what happened was the writer wrote a nice blog post, and I'll close that. And then the evaluator says, yeah, this article is very nice and engaging, capturing adventurous spirit activity. However, consider toning down the metaphors. That's awesome.
Little too flowery, a little too
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Because anytime I see things, anytime I read articles where it sounds a little too flowery, I'm like, like, did that person really write that? But eventually, it kicked it back. It did its work, and then boom, we have the final document. Okay, and so this all works locally. That's great. So let me go back to VS Code, and you can see all the logs here, and you can see all the things that I was doing on the back end. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll stop these processes. Stop. And what I'll do now is take the next step, right? We know it works locally. Can it work in containers? And so lucky enough, the wonderful devs that put this together, they actually put together a Docker file for me. So I have a Docker file. And so I don't need very much instructions in running this thing. So the Docker file here lists step-by-step what you need, what you need to build the application, build and run it. And so it's doing all the things that I did in my terminal just a few minutes ago. And it's exposing this particular port and then running that. And same thing with the web front end. Now, multi-container solutions, how do you run that, right? Do I need to spin up one container and then manually spin up the other container? No. What you can do is you can actually use Docker Compose, which is also a file that's in this repo already. And using Docker Compose, I can actually run this multi-container solution. And so I will do that.
Now, given that you're a Kubernetes person, is there a reason that you pick Compose over Kubernetes locally?
So I tend to work this way. I tend to do everything locally using Docker Desktop as much as possible. I try to take Kubernetes out of the equation, especially when I'm doing really fast iterations, right? Because I don't want to have to rely on the external system just out the gate. And so what I do is I would typically just put together a Docker Compose file. And then when I'm ready for Kubernetes, I can kind of translate some of these things into like Kubernetes constructs, right? Because an app is going to rely on the same things, whether it's in Docker Compose, containers in Docker Compose or containers in Kubernetes. Okay. And what I mean by that is you're going to need to know what port it listens on. You're going to need to know what environment variables the application is going to need. Now, here we're doing a little bit of cheating and we're just loading it up from our local environment file. But we can take this similar approach in Kubernetes. And so that's one big reason why I don't know about y'all. You guys tell me what your local development workflow is, but I tend to use Docker Compose locally and then graduate into Kubernetes.
Okay, I was just curious because Docker Desktop usually includes a Kubernetes environment. There's other local developer Kubernetes options. I was just curious as to why you picked that particular one. Not that any one is not that any of those particular options is definitive.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just easier to write a single Kubernetes. Easier for me to write a single Docker Compose file than it is Kubernetes manifest out the gate. I will eventually face the music and write the manifest, but when I'm iterating and I'm in a fast development cycle, that's just kind of like how I would roll.
Well, and this is a good single step to, does my workload work in containers the way it works locally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it gives you a good sanity check too. Because if it works here, it should work there, right? Yeah. So you can see like the
Oh,
application is working totally fine in a Docker Composer and a containerized environment as
it's
well.
listening to us.
Yes.
Consider toning down the flowery language.
Uh,
It's taking our wording now.
yeah, maybe I should.
You got a smart speaker listening there or something, or
That
no?
would be a great addition to this project. Yeah. Um,
Oh,
yeah, we'll have like um, a live speaker or moderator kind of telling us that in our ear
yeah.
in the headpiece. Yeah. Okay. So we got through the local development part, which is good. We got through the containerized part, which is good as well. And here in the workshop content, I talk a little bit about what goes on here and a special note on what I'm doing with this volume mount here. I should talk about that.
Yeah.
But let me
Briefly.
make sure I move on to the next time-consuming step before I talk about that.
I'll make sure we come back to it.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're gonna do is, yeah, it works on my machine. It works on containers, which theoretically it should work on all machines too. But let's go ahead and put that to the test. Let's go ahead and deploy this into an AKS Automatic cluster. And so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna use the Azure portal. So we're going from nice DevOps infrastructure as code, quick way to spin something up to ClickOps, which is ClickOps is great when you are learning something for the first time. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and get this going. If you haven't done anything with Kubernetes, or excuse me, AKS Automatic before, all you need to do is in the search bar here, just search for Kubernetes, and then it'll be probably one of the services at the top of the list there. So Kubernetes services. What you will need to do here is create a new automatic cluster, and you can see it's at the top of the list, automatic Kubernetes cluster. And here's how easy it has gotten to deploy an AKS Automatic cluster. Okay. And I'll talk a little bit about what AKS Automatic is in a second, but basically what we're going to do is just fill in two text boxes. We're going to go ahead and look for the resource group where we just did our ACD deployment, and then we're going to give it a name. And then I will deploy this into East US. Because I know I have quota over there. I know I deployed all the other things to East US too, but I'll deploy my cluster to East US. I think it's close enough. Okay. And so you'll see here that the automatic upgrade scheduler is in authentication, and authorization is using Microsoft Entra ID. And then for monitoring, I can go ahead and select various resources, right? So you can see that monitoring, it's automatically enabled by default, so it's all checked. It's up to me whether or not I want to use existing resources or create new resources along with this. And here, it's already picked up that I have Azure Monitor Workspace and Azure Managed Grafana, and so it just automatically selected those for me. So that's great. I don't need to do anything here. Alerting is on. We're good. Tags, always use tags, but I won't do
Except
that
for
here
now.
in this workshop. Except for now, yes. But in
Always
production, always use tags.
Always use tags, except when you don't.
Yeah. I tell my kids all that all the time. I said, do as I say, not as I do. So here's all the defaults that we get with an AKS Automatic cluster. So I'll go ahead and click create, and this takes a while. Okay.
Yep.
I have two things that I need to circle back on. I'll hit the Docker thing in a second, but let's just go really quick, talk about what AKS Automatic is. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you've worked with AKS at all, I guess up until like 6 months ago or a few months ago, May is when we announced it. It was a little bit difficult to get started, right? Because although AKS makes the Kubernetes experience a little more palatable because it's in a managed, I guess, offering for you all, there was still some things that you had to consider, some design decisions that you had to make, right? And so what AKS Automatic is basically it's kind of like abstracting that even further away from you and just really trying to streamline your cluster setup, your cluster operation, and really make some of these design decisions for you. Okay,
So,
because when you think about,
so is it
go
kind of
ahead.
like an easy button for like an opinionated setup,
Yeah,
right?
it
Because I mean, there's so many choices for like tools and things to plug in. Like deciding to use Kubernetes is like just the first. It fires. It answers more, or it causes more questions than it answers,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. And a lot of the questions around these pillars of, I
Yeah.
guess, responsibilities or design decisions that you need, like, how am I going to secure this thing? How should I set up networking that's not going to bite me later on? What should I do with auto scaling? And how do I enable these observability tools? Which one should I use? And so a lot of these design decisions have been made for you. Oh, and I went way too far. There we go. So AKS Automatic is not a new product. It's probably not really well, it is a new offering, but it's more of a like a SKU that basically comes with defaults and pre-configurations. And these are all the things that the AKS team is enabling for you out the gate and also managing for you on your behalf, right? And so these are all features that were always available on AKS. It was just up to you as the end user to go and pick and choose and can configure all this stuff. And so what you're getting with AKS Automatic is you're just getting all this stuff just enabled, right? So from cluster security, having that Azure RBAC enabled, disabling local access and SSH access to the cluster. The cool open source project image cleaner, and putting that in there. Also putting in like deployment safeguards, right? And so, and one big thing, the networking, right? Leveraging Azure CNI overlay powered by Cilium, right? Because networking has always been a big question when starting off, right? And so the AKS team has taken all the learnings from running AKS for both customers and our internal customers. And we've taken all these best practices and these learnings and kind of like packaged it up into this solution. That's what you get here. Okay.
Awesome.
So,
And I think next week we're going to dive into some of the details of some of these add-on or these design decisions that have been made for you, and how
right,
and the capabilities that they offer in the context of running this application.
right, right,
So,
right.
so make sure to join us again next week.
Yes. Yes. I
I say
am.
us, but I mean me and a player
um,
to be named later. But yeah,
yeah, somebody to be named later.
yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. I won't be there, unfortunately, but I will be catching it on recording. Yeah. Um, there's one other thing that I needed to quickly touch on, and it was on
Yes,
uh,
on your Docker file.
yes, 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 yes. Okay. So this thing I really wanted to touch on. So on the backend API in the Python project, obviously it calls out to Azure OpenAI to basically invoke the inferencing API, right? You need to authenticate to that, and in pretty much anytime you need to authenticate to any Azure service, I would highly recommend that you do not use any credentials. Don't use keys as much as possible. So if a service supports passwordless authentication using Microsoft Entra ID, use that. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's what this team did. They actually wrote the authentication modules to use the Microsoft or Azure Identity SDK. And so it uses basically passwordless login. And in this scenario, when I was running it locally, it was using my Azure CLI login context, right? So my
Yeah.
user account had the ability to authenticate to it, and so it was able to use that. And so it works fine locally, but inside of a container, it's a little bit different. Inside of a container, there is no Azure CLI, and my login context is not even in there. And so what I did was, uh, as a bit of a hack, I would call it a hack, is I'm actually mounting my home directory into the container, because you can do that with containers. You can actually mount and map drives into there. So I'm basically using that to mount and map into this. So
yeah, and just to touch on the authentication bit.
mhm,
So if you're using the Azure Identity package for whatever language that we have them available for,
mhm,
there as long as you use the default credential, you can constrain what it will look at, but by default it will look for a number of different ways of authentication, including like managed identity, workload identity, which is supported in
mhm.
AKS.
Yeah,
And then it can fall back down to pulling service principal details from a new environment, or grabbing your AZ CLI authentication.
right.
And so that gives you a nice, you don't have to have these conditional paths for your authentication if you just use the default credential, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I mounted my home directory, because the files will be there and
Yep.
the SDK will just kind of like just flow through and eventually find my token. Okay.
Cool.
So I am gonna speed things along over here. So after the AKS cluster is created, and again, I have one pre-provision, what you need to do is you actually need to attach the AKS cluster to your container registry, because our containers are going to be published over there. And so I've kind of done that ahead of time, so we don't have to wait on that. And then I've done also this AZ AKS get credentials command, okay, to actually download the kube config. And you can then start talking with the Kubernetes API. Just an important note here, because Microsoft Entra ID is enabled on this, if you do not have the kube login binary installed, you won't be able to authenticate against your cluster, because it needs to go out against Microsoft Entra ID and make sure you can authenticate against that. If you don't have kube login, no worries. Just run this AZ AKS install CLI command, and that will get kube login installed on your machine. You may have to put sudo in front of it, which was the case for me. So in Kubernetes, and I'm gonna gloss over some of the Kubernetes constructs here, but I think we've covered some of this stuff in previous Learn Live sessions. So
Mhm.
feel free to go back through the Microsoft Reactor channel and find the content there. But I'll go ahead and create a namespace, because this is where I want my application to be deployed into. Okay. And then check this out. You know how I talked about that big giant M file?
Yeah.
We can actually take advantage of that in Kubernetes, but we need to put it inside of a config map instead, right? So we couldn't just mount the file directly. We need a config map resource, a Kubernetes config map resource. And so if I do this and I say, okay, give me what's all in the config map now. So here we go. This is now a Kubernetes resource, and it has all of the details that I need for my application. Okay. So names cluster spun up, registry is connected. I have my namespace and I have my config map, which has all of the environment variables and secrets that I need. How do I get my app into the cluster?
In
Well,
10 minutes or less.
in 10 minutes or less, let's go.
Yeah.
There is a feature of AKS called automated deployments, and we can actually leverage that to deploy an application into our cluster. And our teammate, George Artero, actually published a video on the Microsoft Reactor channel where he covers this in depth. So I highly recommend that you go and check that out. And so I'll speed through this here. Workflow, because what this does is it actually creates a GitHub action workflow file in my repository. And so what I'll need to do is authorize myself to GitHub. Once I do that, it can actually find the repos, and then I can actually select the repo, select the branch, and then move on. Automated deployments can actually build the Docker files and the Kubernetes manifest for you. But in this case, the lovely devs that actually created this, they have all this in place, right? And so I can actually just leverage the files that they've created and just point to it. Okay, so there's the image. So the container image, so I'm telling it to use this Docker file in this directory and use this as the build context, and then save it to my container registry and save it as the API. That's going to be my container image name. Okay, Kubernetes manifest file. I didn't touch on that, but there are manifest files in the repo already. And so I can just go ahead and pick that, select it, and deploy it into my CCW namespace. And CCW is Contoso Creative Writer. So just try to make it easy. Okay. So I'll go ahead and click deploy. And this is actually doing things on the back end for me. It's creating a service principal. It's giving that service principal the proper permissions to deploy into my AKS cluster. And then it's actually creating a GitHub action workflow file and submitting that as a PR into my repo. So the pull request is being created, and I should be able to do this. Approve pull request. I think there's one more thing that I have to do here. So let's just breeze through here, because yes, this is what I need. Let me just show you something real quick. So you're going to need to do this before you approve the pull request. Inside of infra manifest API deployment, you can see here that the image is just set to API latest. There's no container registry involved there. The action that's being used in the workflow file is going to search for anything that has the same image with the container registry name in there. And because I don't have a container registry name, this will never get swapped out, because that's what I'm eventually going to do, is I'm going to swap this out. So let me just go ahead and make these changes. And let me show you what just happened here. Source control. So you can see in my two manifest files, I swapped out API latest with this container registry, and that's for both. Okay. So let me just go ahead and grab these commands. And so I'm just going to commit those and push them up to my repository. And now I am ready to go and approve this workflow. So if I just go to the files change, it's not doing, it's not making any additional edits. It's just adding a new file. And this is basically the new workflow where it checks out the project, builds the container using the AZ ACR build command, logs in to my Kubernetes cluster, and then eventually deploys the application by using this container registry, the container name, and the GitHub SHA. Okay, so it's going to build a brand new container, insert that new container image ID into my manifest, and then deploy it all into the cluster. So let's go ahead and go back to conversations, merge. Okay, and then I can safely delete this branch. So I have to actually do that for both applications. So let's go ahead and close that. And I'll do the same for the web. Doso. Okay, main. And I will select the Docker file, but this time it's in web. And there we go. src web. There's my container registry. I want the web container. And again,
do you need to update your web images as well in the repo? Or did that sed command get them as well?
I actually did it for both files when I did that one set command. So it'll take care of both. So I can hit review. Boom.
So you're saying is you were being thorough.
As thorough as I can be on a live stream. Yeah.
Awesome.
I just want to make sure that's good. Deploy. Okay, that's going. But you have me second guessing myself. Aha, yeah. So that's there for the web deployment manifest.
It looks like the changes
And
weren't synced.
yeah, let's go. Let's go ahead and get pull. Okay, so it just detected that one GitHub workflow. This should be good. I will go ahead and merge, confirm.
I bet you. I think the UI, because I think you pushed from the CLI. Right?
Yeah.
And then so the UI just didn't pick that up. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. So this stuff is going and it takes a little while to bake. So this is where we are at the mercy of the demo gods and the time it takes to make a container.
Yeah, but from here, right? The automated deployment is going to take those images and use those with the deployment files that you specified to actually just to roll it out into the cluster.
Yeah. Yeah. So here it actually, I don't know why that failed. Sometimes you can just give it another kick.
Yeah.
It worked. It worked this time.
Well, the login's happening now, but
Okay. Yeah. Let's see.
we'll see if that. There we go.
Yeah. Transient.
Network gremlins.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah.
But yeah. So I mean, once those containers exist,
Mm-hmm.
then it will roll out and deploy those into your cluster,
Mm-hmm.
and from there next week we can kind of show all kind of all the stuff that AKS Automatic deploys out for you, how that enables your access to the app, your visibility of what's happening, your ability to scale and respond to
Mm-hmm.
changing conditions for the application, and all the goodness there. So I think this gives us a really great start on how to get out, and the lab has some additional steps in there where Paul goes into debugging applications,
Yeah.
integrating with other services, and takes you even further. So,
right. Yeah. I would highly recommend. I think we are just about running out of time here.
Got about a minute.
Yeah, about a minute or so. And so let me just quickly walk through like what you would do from here on out is, you would just configure the ingress all using the Azure portal. You can from there just test the application out. Like as Steve mentioned, debugging because we have container insights looped in there. And then right here, this is the one thing that I really wanted to get to, but I'll leave that up to you to kind of like wrap up and finish out, is basically using AKS service connector to actually connect to Azure OpenAI. Remember how I talked about the whole workload identity thing and just going completely passwordless? You can actually configure AKS workload identity just with a few clicks. And service connector is really great at number one, establishing that connection to Azure OpenAI, and number two, helping you update your deployment manifest to actually take advantage of that. So this is really cool, and you can actually do it all in the portal here.
Awesome. Yeah, because I always get hung up when I start configuring, like, I got to go update those manifests as well, right? So
yeah. And this screenshot that I have here that I'm sitting on, it's basically what you're going to see in the portal, and you just hit that little apply button at the bottom, and then it's there.
Goes and does it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, thank you so much for running us through all of this.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot. I've not gotten to play as much with AKS Automatic as I'd like, and now you've given me a platform to continue to expand on my uh, growing growing knowledge of how I can get running faster with it.
Yeah. And yeah, you can get running pretty fast with this stuff. So this is cool. So thank you everybody that actually joined and that was chatting here. I see some comments going by. Maybe I'll take a look at that in a few minutes. But yeah, next week, right, Steve? Next week,
Yes,
you're
next week.
cool. So
Yeah,
next week, Steve will be back. He's going to do some more with this exact same project here. Take it even further. And then, if you're interested in learning more about the Learn Live content that we have, because it's not just these live streams; they're like demo bites, they're blog posts. I mean, it's all here on the Cloud Native website. We have a Build Intelligent App campaign. And so if you head over to this URL, you should see all of that. So
great. Thanks, Paul.
with that, I think we can close it out. So thanks everybody for being here. It's been a pleasure, and we'll see you on the next one.